A lost cause, that one. Never had a shred of ambition that mattered, my father pronounced, his voice a gravelly dismissal. Not much later, my name was an insistent whisper across every financial news outlet. I'd just been unveiled as one of the youngest male founders to leave a significant dent in the West Coast tech scene. At the annual family cookout, the collective gasp when I idled my Lamborghini Aventador SVJ into the driveway was, I admit, precisely the note I was aiming for. My name is Caleb Maxwell. I'm 24 years old, and I'd meticulously crafted a disruptive analytics platform from the sun-drenched, sleepy expanse of Malibu, California. Where I grew up, success was measured in calloused palms and the deep, satisfying ache of a day spent hauling equipment. My father, Arthur, had presided over a thriving landscaping empire for 40 years, his worth meticulously tallied in acres manicured and topsoil delivered. When I chose algorithms over aeration, the disappointment in his eyes was a physical thing, a silent, weighty judgment that no amount of digital triumph could seemingly displace. For 3 years, I'd been hunched over my laptop, refining an algorithm that could predict market shifts with an unnerving accuracy, far surpassing the antiquated models favored by established firms. Nights bled into weekends, holidays dissolved into lines of code, while my peers were out engaging with what they quaintly called life. My father would occasionally materialize in my doorway, a silhouette of disapproval, shaking his head and muttering something about boys playing with glorified calculators. Each pronouncement was a fresh, crisp incentive to work another hour, just to ensure his eventual inevitable re-education. Last month, I'd overheard him at our Sunday dinner regaling my Uncle Walter with his usual prophetic wisdom. "Caleb will be back hauling mulch by autumn," he chuckled, a sound like gravel grinding. That boy couldn't even sell air in a vacuum. I offered nothing in response. I simply continued to dissect my pot roast, helped clear the table with practiced efficiency, and then drove back to my apartment to finalize the most significant deal of my nascent career. I'd spent my formative years observing my father's relentless expansion from a single battered pickup to a 50-truck fleet. Every summer since the age of 12, I'd been his unpaid apprentice, my hands blistered from pruning shears, my neck perpetually sunburned under the relentless California sun. He'd instilled in me the concept of hard work. Regrettably, somewhere along the way, he'd conflated it entirely with hard labor. When I received my acceptance to Pacific Coast University's business program, his acknowledgement was a masterclass in understated disdain. "College boys think they know everything until they meet the real world," he'd grunted, pressing a crisp $50 bill into my palm. That apparently was his version of a send-off. My mother, Eleanor, a woman of quiet, subversive strength, was different. She'd slipped me $2,500 from her carefully hoarded teaching salary, her whisper a conspiratorial breeze. "Go make something of yourself that truly makes you happy, dear." She never dared utter such heresy in front of him. During my sophomore year, an early iteration of my algorithm caught the discerning eye of a professor. "This could fundamentally reshape how ordinary individuals engage with investment," he declared, his voice hushed with genuine awe. I withdrew the following semester, the decision as clear as the Pacific horizon, to devote myself entirely to transforming it into something tangible. When I called home to explain this rather significant pivot, my mother's tears were audible even through the phone line. My father, predictably, simply hung up. For the subsequent 2 years, my diet consisted primarily of instant noodles, and my office was a cramped corner of a shared apartment, perpetually redolent with the scent of stale coffee. venture capitalists, a parade of polished skepticism, dismissed me with monotonous regularity. Too unseasoned, they'd intone, insufficient track record. Each rejection email was meticulously printed and affixed to my wall, not as a monument to motivation, but as a stark, visual roster of those who had so confidently misjudged. Leo Sterling, my roommate from freshman year, remained a steadfast anomaly. He'd materialize with sustenance when I'd forgotten the concept of eating, meticulously proofread my increasingly audacious pitches, and never once entertained the notion that I might not succeed. "You are, without question, the most intelligent individual I know," he'd affirm. "Just try to remember us little people when you're obscenely wealthy." Meanwhile, my father's pronouncements grew sharper, more pointed, like well-aimed darts. At Thanksgiving, he introduced me to his most affluent clients as my son who's still finding his footing. At Christmas, he suggested, with an air of profound magnanimity, that I apply for a supervisory role within his company, since that computer hobby doesn't seem to be panning out. I noted with a detached clinical interest how he'd abruptly pivot conversations whenever I attempted to articulate my work, how he'd interrupt me mid-sentence to commend a neighbor's impeccably manicured lawn, how he never once displayed the slightest curiosity about the digital edifice I was constructing. On my 24th birthday, an email landed in my inbox from Apex Innovations, one of the most formidable hedge funds on the West Coast. They wished to license my technology exclusively for $35 million. I read the email 17 times, standing motionless in my kitchen, the coffee in my hand growing steadily colder. I called Leo first. His shriek was so piercing, I had to hold the phone at arm's length. Then I called my mother. Her tears returned, but this time they were of a decidedly different vintage. My father, I did not call. 3 days later, I affixed my signature to the contracts in San Francisco. The Apex executives, a collection of impeccably tailored individuals, escorted me to a restaurant where the menu, delightfully, omitted prices entirely. The CEO, a woman named Victoria Thorne, raised her crystal glass. "To the future of finance," she declared, her gaze piercing. Glasses clinked, a delicate symphony. I smiled, a practiced, almost imperceptible curve of the lips, but all I could hear was my father's voice, a persistent, grating echo. A lost cause, that one, never had a shred of ambition that mattered. That evening, in the sterile luxury of my hotel suite, a text arrived from my cousin Jasper, the solitary member of my extended family who had ever feigned interest in my digital endeavors. "Just saw the Silicon Valley Standard article. Holy Caleb, you're practically a legend." I flipped open my laptop. There it was, emblazoned across every prominent financial news portal. My face, my nascent company, my meticulously curated narrative. 24-year-old dropout secures 8-figure deal with West Coast Titan. The article, with a rather tiresome emphasis, highlighted my age 3 times, as if it were the singular, most remarkable facet of my being. I closed the laptop, the screen reflecting the glittering expanse of the San Francisco skyline. The anger had dissipated. The hurt had receded. What remained was a profound clarity, like the morning fog finally lifting from the Malibu coastline. I knew, with an almost chilling certainty, precisely what my next steps would be. The following morning, I strolled into a Lamborghini dealership, clad in faded jeans and a nondescript t-shirt. The salesman, predictably, ignored my existence until I casually mentioned the price bracket I was considering. 2 hours later, I was piloting a gleaming red Lamborghini Aventador SVJ out of the lot. Not because I harbored any particular affinity for Italian supercars, but because I required a message delivered with an undeniable visceral clarity that could not possibly be misinterpreted. I did not announce my impending arrival back in Malibu. I was acutely aware that my father's annual Founders' Day cookout would be in full, boisterous swing, the one where he meticulously assembled his most valued clients, his entire workforce, and the full complement of his extended family, ostensibly to showcase his enduring success. I timed my entrance for precisely 2 p.m., when the backyard would be at its most densely populated. As I turned into the familiar driveway, the guttural rumble of the engine preceded the car's visual appearance, drawing every head, every gaze. I parked with deliberate precision next to my father's meticulously maintained pickup truck, the one he'd always regarded with such profound, almost paternal pride, and took a slow, measured breath. This, I assured myself, was not about mere revenge. This was about finally, irrevocably being seen. I stepped into the backyard, carrying nothing but the glinting keys to my new acquisition. The cacophony of conversation ceased abruptly, as if an unseen hand had violently slammed a pause button. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, a silent gasp. My father stood frozen at the grill, spatula suspended mid-flip, a half-cooked burger patty teetering precariously. "Apologies for my tardiness," I stated, my voice even, as I advanced towards him. The traffic from San Francisco was, predictably, quite dreadful. He recovered with a practiced, almost alarming speed, adopting the expansive, utterly insincere smile he reserved exclusively for his most lucrative clients. "Well, look who decided to grace us with his presence." He clapped me on the shoulder a little too forcefully. "Whose vehicle did you manage to borrow for this rather dramatic entrance, son?" A ripple of sycophantic laughter spread through the assembled guests. "I didn't," I replied quietly, my gaze unwavering. "It's mine. Acquired it yesterday." "Right," he nodded, a conspiratorial wink directed at Uncle Walter. "And I'm purchasing a private jet next week." More laughter, louder this time, punctuated by the clinking of beer bottles. I reached into my back pocket, extracted the vehicle's title, and presented it to him. The transformation on his face as he scanned the document was a study in controlled disintegration. He folded it with meticulous care, as if handling a fragile, dangerous artifact, and returned it to me. "Must be rather convenient to possess such affluent acquaintances who entrust you with their toys," he remarked, his voice a strained monotone, as he abruptly turned back to the grill. "Do grab a plate. Your mother, bless her heart, has prepared her infamous potato salad." Throughout the interminable afternoon, I made several attempts to engage him in genuine conversation, to truly talk. Each overture was met with an almost artistic deflection. When I broached the subject of the deal, he seamlessly pivoted to the intricacies of commercial landscaping contracts. When I endeavored to explain the foundational technology, he suddenly discovered an urgent existential need to replenish the ice in the cooler. When his long-standing business partner, a man named Pete, inquired about the Silicon Valley Standard article, my father interjected with a dismissive wave. "Don't believe every sensationalized fabrication you read, Pete. These journalists, they exaggerate everything these days." By evening, the majority of the guests had mercifully departed. I located my father in his home office, hunched over a formidable stack of paperwork, precisely as he always was, after hosting these carefully choreographed displays of prosperity. "Dad, we need to discuss the current trajectory of my company." He did not lift his gaze. "There is nothing, absolutely nothing to discuss. You stumbled into some fortunate computer fluke. Do not for a moment delude yourself into believing this makes you exceptional. $35 million is not, by any reasonable metric, luck, I stated, my voice as steady as a surgeon's hand. He finally looked at me, his eyes narrowed to suspicious slits. Do you comprehend what truly forged this family, Caleb? 40 years of literally breaking my back, not idling in a climate-controlled room, tapping on buttons, not conjuring imaginary figures on a screen. He gestured with a calloused finger towards a faded photograph on his wall, a younger version of himself, perhaps 20, standing proudly beside his very first battered truck. That is authentic labor. That is tangible success. What I have built is equally authentic. Is it? He leaned forward, his voice dripping with condescension. Allow me to impart some wisdom, Caleb. I have witnessed your particular archetype countless times. A fleeting phenomenon, a momentary blip of success. You will squander that money within a year, and those West Coast sharks will summarily eject you once they've extracted every last ounce of utility. And then, pray tell, where will you find yourself? I offered no response. You will be precisely back here, he continued, his voice gaining a triumphant cadence, groveling for employment, and I, regrettably, will be compelled to offer a public explanation as to why my son proved utterly incapable of navigating the real world. I exited his office without uttering another syllable. In the kitchen, my mother was engaged in the meditative act of washing dishes. She turned, drying her hands on a dish towel. "He's immensely proud of you," she murmured softly. "He simply possesses no discernible mechanism for expressing it." I shook my head, a slow, deliberate negation. "No, Mom, he is not proud. He is profoundly, irrevocably threatened." The following morning, a text arrived from my cousin Jasper. "Uncle Arthur is circulating a rather elaborate fabrication that your deal spectacularly imploded and that you fabricated everything. He's claiming you merely rented that car for a fleeting display of ostentation." Something cold, hard, and utterly devoid of emotion settled in my chest. Not anger, merely a chilling certainty. I spent the ensuing week in Malibu, opting for the impersonal anonymity of a downtown hotel, rather than the suffocating familiarity of my parents' residence. I convened with legal counsel, financial strategist, and the nascent team I was assembling. Yet, beneath the surface of these professional engagements, a steady stream of disquieting information seeped in. Whispers about my father, about me, about the very foundations of my company. Leo texted, "Your father appeared at the apartment, rather agitated, inquiring about your whereabouts. Asked an alarming number of questions concerning the disposition of your funds." My aunt called, her voice laced with manufactured concern. "Arthur informed everyone at church that you're embroiled in some form of legal entanglement with those San Francisco individuals. Is everything satisfactory?" Even Victoria Thorne from Apex Innovations reached out, her tone a marvel of professional understatement. "Just a quick check-in. Someone purporting to be your father contacted our offices, demanding granular details regarding our agreement. Naturally, we provided absolutely nothing." I drove to my parents' residence on a Tuesday afternoon, a day I knew my father would be immersed in his work. My mother admitted me, her movements imbued with a nervous, almost frantic energy as she prepared coffee. "Mom, what precisely is transpiring with Dad?" She settled into a chair, her hands clasped tightly around her mug, as if drawing warmth from its ceramic embrace. "He's simply concerned for your welfare, that is all." "Concerned enough to propagate malicious falsehoods about me? Concerned enough to harass my business partners?" She lowered her gaze, her eyes fixed on the condensation on her mug. "You must endeavor to comprehend. Your success, it fundamentally challenges the very bedrock of his identity, everything he has meticulously constructed. That, regrettably, is not my burden." "No," she conceded quietly, her voice barely a whisper, "but he is, quite effectively, rendering it your burden." She hesitated, then continued, her voice barely audible. "There is something else. The business, Caleb, it's struggling, has been for years. The new regional landscaping conglomerates are systematically undercutting his prices. He simply cannot compete." The revelation struck me with a force I hadn't anticipated. Why did he not inform me? "Pride," she stated simply, a single devastating word. "The identical reason he cannot, for the life of him, celebrate your achievements. In his meticulously constructed reality, if he concedes that your methodology proved effective, it inherently implies that his own methodology has, in fact, failed." I departed, leaving my mother with a vague, non-committal promise to address the situation. But as I drove away, the insidious truth began to unfurl itself. The problem transcended my father's mere pride. It was rooted in a profound existential fear, fear that I, his own son, represented an inexorable future that had no discernible place for men like him. That evening, I placed a call to Uncle Walter, my father's younger brother and long-suffering business partner. We met at a discreet bar downtown, the clinking of glasses providing a melancholic counterpoint to our conversation. "He remortgaged the house," Walter revealed, his gaze fixed on the amber liquid in his beer glass. "3 years ago. Poured every last cent into the business. New trucks, upgraded equipment, a desperate, futile attempt to keep pace with the corporate behemoths. It's a losing battle, Caleb." "Why are you disclosing this to me?" Walter finally looked up, his eyes weary. "Because yesterday he inquired if I believed you would be inclined to invest your computer money into the landscaping operation. He's meticulously planning to solicit your financial assistance." I leaned back, a slow, chilling smile playing on my lips. He disbelieves the veracity of my success, yet he desires my capital? He believes it's real, Caleb. He simply possesses an insurmountable inability to admit it. Walter sighed, a sound of profound resignation. "Look, your father is a man of formidable pride. He literally forged something from nothing. But the world had changed, and he, tragically, did not. On my return journey, I drove past my father's business. The lights, predictably, were still ablaze. I parked across the street, observing him through the window, hunched over his endless paperwork. For a fleeting moment, I saw him with an unnerving clarity, not as my father, but as a man rapidly exhausting his dwindling options, clinging with desperate tenacity to a past that was rapidly dissolving. I realized then that his relentless pointed attacks on me were not merely born of resentment for my success. They were a desperate, pathetic attempt to utilize me as an explanation for his own impending failure. If my unconventional methods were inherently flawed, then his traditional methods weren't failing. They were merely unappreciated in a world that no longer valued authentic labor. The following morning, a terse text materialized on my phone. "Require discussion regarding business opportunity. Dinner tomorrow, 7 p.m. I responded with a single loaded word: yes. I did not attend dinner. Instead, I dedicated the entire day to setting a series of irreversible events into motion. First, I contacted Victoria Thorne at Apex Innovations. I require comprehensive intelligence on landscaping enterprises within the Malibu region, specifically identifying prime acquisition targets and those exhibiting aggressive expansion. By noon, I possessed a meticulously curated list of the 3 most dominant players in the area. By 3 p.m., I had secured meetings with 2 of them. Next, I contacted a commercial real estate agent. I am actively seeking properties suitable for a cutting-edge tech incubator, ideally situated within Malibu's revitalized industrial district. The subsequent morning, I met with Viridian Solutions, the preeminent landscaping conglomerate in the state. The owner, Marcus Thorne, a distant cousin of Victoria, as it happened, was known for his ruthlessly aggressive expansion strategies. "We've had our eye on Maxwell Landscaping for a considerable period," he admitted, his voice devoid of emotion, after I presented my meticulously researched interest. "Prime service area, a remarkably loyal customer base, but Arthur, bless his stubborn heart, refuses to even acknowledge our calls." "What if I could facilitate a change in that particular dynamic?" I inquired, my tone perfectly neutral. By evening, I possessed a formal offer, meticulously drafted and legally binding. Viridian Solutions would acquire my father's company for $3 million, a sum twice its current paper valuation, inclusive of a 5-year employment contract for my father as a regional operations manager, complete with a generous profit-sharing scheme. Crucially, all of his existing employees would retain their positions, now bolstered by significantly improved benefits. I also had a lease meticulously signed for a 30,000 square foot warehouse space, which I was already in the process of converting into the gleaming new headquarters for my rapidly expanding enterprise. I was, with a quiet, profound satisfaction, bringing my entire operation back to Malibu. The final exquisite piece of the puzzle clicked into place when I extended an offer to Jasper, who had just graduated with a business degree, to serve as my chief operating officer. "Are you serious, Caleb?" he stammered, his voice laced with disbelief. "I've never managed anything of this scale." "Neither, for that matter, had I informed him, a faint, knowing smile touching my lips. "But you possess an unwavering belief in the edifice we are constructing. That, Jasper, is the sole metric that truly matters." 3 days after deliberately missing dinner with my father, I had still not deigned to respond to his increasingly terse, increasingly irritated messages. Instead, I walked into his office unannounced, a slim folder clutched in my hand. He looked up, a flash of raw, unadulterated anger momentarily distorting his features. "So, you finally decided to grace me with your presence, after standing me up like some common acquaintance." I placed the folder with deliberate care on his desk. "This, Dad, is considerably more significant than dinner." "What is this, then? Your grand investment in my company?" His tone was a masterful blend of mockery and thinly veiled contempt. "No," I corrected him, my voice devoid of inflection. "It is an acquisition offer from Viridian Solutions. They wish to purchase Maxwell Landscaping." The color drained from his face with an almost theatrical swiftness. "You went behind my back," he sputtered, his voice rising. "I went ahead of you," I corrected, my tone still calm, utterly dispassionate. "The business, Dad, is failing. You and we both know this with absolute certainty. This offer, however, preserves your legacy. Your employees, those men you claim to care so deeply for, they retain their jobs. You, yourself, get to remain as a regional manager, with a rather substantial profit-sharing arrangement. So that's your grand scheme? To sweep in with your Silicon Valley connections and seize control of the enterprise I painstakingly built with my own two hands? His voice was now a raw, ragged bellow. I shook my head, a gesture of mild disappointment. The business you built, Dad, is in its death throes. This, and only this, saves it. He rose from his chair, his frame trembling almost imperceptibly. Get out! There is one final item, I stated, reaching into the inner pocket of my jacket. I placed a single, gleaming key on the polished surface of his desk. He stared at it, his brow furrowed with confusion and suspicion. What precisely is this supposed to be? It is the key to my Lamborghini. Consider it a gift. His eyes narrowed, suspicion warring with a nascent, unfamiliar flicker of comprehension. I do not require your charity, Caleb. It is not charity, Dad. It is an advance. I turned towards the door, then paused, looking back at his bewildered face. The offer incidentally expires in 48 hours. After that, Viridian will simply approach your competitors. Consider your employees, Dad. Consider Mom. As I walked out, I heard the faint metallic clink of him picking up the key. The following morning, a text arrived from my mother. He drove the car this morning, didn't utter a single word about it, but he drove it. By evening, my father had, predictably, placed the call to Marcus Thorne at Viridian Solutions. 24 hours after that, they had reached a deal in principle. I observed from a discreet distance, saying nothing, as my father, a man now seemingly diminished, affixed his signature to the documents that irrevocably transferred ownership of the business he had meticulously constructed over 4 decades. He appeared smaller somehow, seated at that imposing conference table, yet when he emerged, the keys to my Lamborghini still undeniably nestled in his pocket. His shoulders were, curiously, straighter than they had been in years. 2 months later, I stood on a makeshift stage within my newly renovated headquarters. Around me, a buzzing throng of 300 individuals, my burgeoning workforce, prominent local business leaders, an eager contingent of journalists, and a scattering of family members. My father stood rigidly at the back, arms crossed, still a profoundly uncomfortable presence in spaces such as this. Today, we are officially inaugurating Horizon Analytics, I announced, my voice resonating with quiet authority. Our core mission is to render sophisticated financial technology universally accessible, not merely to the gilded towers of Silicon Valley, and we are immensely proud to be cultivating this future right here in Malibu. A wave of enthusiastic applause swept through the room. I continued, my gaze sweeping across the expectant faces. We are also privileged to announce our inaugural local strategic partnership. Horizon Analytics is investing a substantial $5 million into Viridian Regional Holdings, the newly formed parent company encompassing several prominent landscaping enterprises, including, notably, the former Maxwell Landscaping. A ripple of murmurs, then a distinct gasp, permeated the crowd. My father's head snapped up, his eyes suddenly fixed on me. As an integral component of this investment, we are launching a groundbreaking technology initiative specifically designed to empower traditional service businesses to thrive within the digital economy. And it is my distinct pleasure to announce that Arthur Maxwell will be spearheading this vital initiative as our Director of Traditional Industries. The room erupted in a sustained crescendo of applause. I looked directly at my father for the first time since my announcement. His face was a mask, utterly unreadable. Arthur has, over 4 decades, meticulously forged something of immeasurable value, a depth of practical knowledge that cannot be distilled into an algorithm, an invaluable experience that cannot be acquired within the confines of a classroom. By seamlessly integrating his unparalleled expertise with our cutting-edge technology, we are not, I assure you, merely supplanting the old with the new. We are, rather, constructing something demonstrably superior to what either could achieve in isolation. After the presentation, as the room buzzed with animated conversation and celebratory clinking of glasses, my father finally approached me. "You orchestrated this entire charade, didn't you?" he stated, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "It was never a question of orchestration, Dad. I plan to build something that genuinely matters," I replied, my tone perfectly even. The rest, as they say, simply fell into place. He surveyed the vibrant, purposeful activity around us, the employees hurrying past with a newfound sense of direction, the gleaming sign bearing my company's name proudly displayed on the wall. "Your name isn't emblazoned on the building," he observed, a faint lingering note of something akin to a challenge in his voice. "Neither, for that matter, was yours," I countered, a subtle, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips. "But everyone ultimately knew who built it." For the first time since my childhood, I detected something akin to respect in his eyes. Not approval. We were unequivocally beyond such quaint notions now, but a stark, undeniable recognition. One builder acknowledging another, he extended his hand. I took it, our grasp firm, almost perfunctory. "The Lamborghini incidentally remains with you," I informed him, my voice still light, conversational. "Consider it a signing bonus." A fleeting, almost imperceptible hint of a smile, a ghost of a grin, flickered across his face. "I already sold it, acquired a new pickup truck instead." He paused, then added, his voice barely audible, "and invested the remainder in your company's stock." 6 months later, I sat in my expansive office, the panoramic view of the Pacific Ocean stretching out before me. On my meticulously organized desk lay a framed article from the Malibu Business Chronicle. Local tech firm revolutionizes traditional industries, generating 300 new opportunities. My father and I were not, by any stretch of the imagination, close. We likely never would be. But we had, with a chilling efficiency, forged a different kind of relationship. Once a week, we convened for lunch, our conversations revolving solely around the intricacies of the traditional industries program. He had, with a surprising lack of self-awareness, begun to bring in other business owners, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, men precisely like him, men who were being inexorably left behind by the relentless march of technology. "They don't require handouts, Caleb," he declared during our last meeting, his voice imbued with a newfound, almost evangelical fervor. "They require tools that resonate with their specific needs." And I listened, truly listened, because in that singular, narrow context, he was undeniably correct. The partnership with Viridian Solutions had, to the astonishment of all involved, far exceeded even the most optimistic projections. My father's antiquated expertise, now meticulously integrated with our cutting-edge technology platform, had propelled their business across 3 states. The very employees who had once toiled under his direct, often arbitrary command, now possessed stock options and comprehensive health care benefits. My mother, bless her liberated soul, had finally, triumphantly, resigned from her teaching position and was, at last, indulging her lifelong wanderlust, something she had always yearned for, but could never, until now, genuinely afford. "Your father, Caleb, actually participated in a cooking class with me in Italy," she recounted, her laughter echoing through our weekly call. "Can you, for a single moment, truly believe it? Leo had seamlessly transitioned into his role as our marketing director, his enthusiasm boundless. Jasper was thriving, a natural, efficient force as COO. We had, with a deliberate, strategic intent, hired 30 recent graduates from local universities, meticulously cultivating a pipeline of raw talent that no longer felt compelled to abandon Malibu in pursuit of opportunity. As for me, I had, with a quiet, profound satisfaction, traded the exhausting pursuit of external validation for the enduring, tangible act of building something truly lasting. The $35 million deal that had once seemed the singular, all-consuming zenith of my ambition was now merely the opening paragraph of a far grander, far more intricate narrative. That evening, as I departed the office, I paused by the wall where we proudly displayed our meticulously articulated company values. At the very bottom, a new addition, suggested by my father during one of our perfunctory meetings, now resided, "Remember whose shoulders you stand on." I walked out to the sprawling parking lot, where my unassuming black sedan was parked with deliberate modesty next to my father's gleaming new pickup truck. No ostentatious luxury vehicles were required anymore. We had both, in our own distinct ways, made our points. Driving home along the shimmering coastline, I contemplated the elusive nature of success, how I had once narrowly defined it as the triumphant act of proving my father demonstrably wrong, and how I now perceived it as something we were in a strange, almost transactional symbiosis, constructing together, each in our own meticulously defined sphere. I had achieved my revenge, certainly, but not in the crude, simplistic manner I had once envisioned, not by humiliating him, nor by stripping away what he valued. Instead, by meticulously crafting a future expansive enough to encompass and ultimately subsume his past. By building something neither of us, in our distinct stubbornness, could have built alone. That, I concluded, felt like winning. Not against him, but with a chilling, undeniable finality for both of us, entirely on my terms.